B. Being a parent does not only entail physically looking after your child. It also involves being there for them psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's understanding and accepting that a child is helpless at a certain stage. They wholly depend on you to keep them holistically safe in a world that's all new to them. Sadly, this is not always something every parent understands before they start a family. Therefore, what ends up taking place is the child growing up in a dysfunctional and unsafe environment. They cry and signal for help, but those bids for attention are ignored or outrightly dismissed. The child learns that they can't rely on their caregivers for support. As a result, many problems start to unfold as the child tries to adapt to different coping mechanisms to survive. This is what gives rise to childhood trauma and wounds. Although the adults meant to look after children should ideally fulfill their role well, it's also important to make room for empathy and understand why some caregivers might struggle to fulfill their responsibilities. The pain inflicted on the child is usually, in most cases, unintentional. Most times the caregivers might actually be oblivious to what's happening and the impact of their parenting style on the child's overall development. Some adults just continue to generational traumas by treating their children the same way they were treated. This often happens if the parents came from an unsafe background and didn't end up taking responsibility for their healing when they grew up. As a result, how they treat their children is all that they know. That's the only way they know how to love and care for others. That's the blueprint their caregivers passed on to them. Unless they are open to change and growth, they too become limited to what's familiar to them, even though it might be toxic parenting styles. Having reviewed these possible reasons why caregivers treat children the way they do, it's important to consider forgiving them for their inability to give you what you need. For most people, if they had known better, they probably would have treated you better and given you a healthy childhood experience. When we don't look at things this way, we run the risk of living the rest of our lives bitter and in victim mode, always blaming others for what they didn't give us instead of taking control and being responsible for our healing now that we are grown. Now, let's revisit the past. Childhood wounds start to appear when a child feels endangered. These wounds are deep-seated and emotional. They affect the child's psyche and even impair their brain development. The child starts to grow up seeing the world from a very different outlook. Instead of life and the world being an exciting adventure